안녕하세요. 제 아이들 여러분. 오늘은 저희 개발팀에서 카일 홀드익 씨를 모시고 랩챗 인터뷰를 진행하려고 합니다. Hi, Kyle. How are you feeling today?
Hi, I'm feeling great.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the lead gameplay engineer here at that game company. In my role, I oversee, a decent number of people now that are on the gameplay team, and I also, work a lot on the design and in a lot of design meetings and help in general the iterative process that we have here to get, yeah, features implemented and get builds out the door.
What are some main examples of your work that you recently worked on?
Well, so very recently we worked on the nesting feature, and I was heavily involved in that feature. I worked on a lot of the underlying tech to basically allow the creation sort of come to life. And I also worked on a lot of the interactive pieces. If you go up to an object that you can place in the world and there's a button over it for you to interact with it, whether that be sit down there or maybe a flame comes up, whatever interactions essentially were on those placeables. I worked on a lot of the tech behind that specifically. Just for fan favorite, in my past, I worked a lot on the dark dragon, or the krill as we know it. And some have called me the father of the krill, so I'll take credit for that one. But yeah, that was one of my original works here a lot of years ago now. So
That's amazing. It's interesting to know that you mainly work for the interaction features because the nesting feature we are going to mainly talk about today is all about interactions, right? I know that nesting feature it just didn't pop up out of nowhere. It was development from our fan creation feature slowly developing to the shared space and the nesting feature ultimately. What do you think is the main difference between the shared space and the nesting feature?
How I like to think about the nesting feature is it's actually kind of almost like the ultimate dream or vision that we had for shared spaces. So when we were building shared spaces originally, and even the interactive placeables that you could place back in the day, we actually only had a table at one time that you could place. That was it. And we continued to add more and more into the game. At first, when you could just place them in the world, and you couldn't save it out as a shared space, it was really only letting you enjoy the moment, let's say, with your friends in that instance. But shared spaces kind of unlocked a new phenomenon, which was you could place a bunch of objects and create something that could be stored and then viewed later and interacted with later. So that kind of already was like unlocking sort of the next generation of interactive play there. And then the nesting was one layer on top of that, which was we really always had a vision of having this cozy space. Almost, I always like to think about like a living room. Let's create a cozy living room. Sometimes when you walk into someone's house and they have this really interesting living room that they've crafted, it gives you a good feeling. You sort of feel almost like the soul of the person that created it to some degree. And I always have this vision of like, it would be so cool if we could have the shared spaces turn into that ultimately. And so I think we had that idea really a long time ago, but it took a lot of iterations to get it to that step. The way I like to think about it is when you're writing a book, you actually go through a lot of iterations and edits before the book is ultimately published. I think the nesting feature is almost like the book that the shared spaces and placeable features were writing towards. So yeah, that's been a big goal for us. Another big difference between just shared spaces and the nest is we actually unlocked a lot more objects that you can place in the nest. Now I know players want more, and obviously we always want more, but we did allow more to be placed there than a shared space. So I think that's already a big improvement. And I think also the furniture itself, there's so many more furniture options now that you can put in the nest. That those kind of came along with the work when we were developing the nest that we probably wouldn't have had unless we really had that mindset of creating that cozy space, like I said. So I think you can thank almost the nest for the all the great new furniture that we have as well. So yeah.
Great. So the nest is, to summarize, the nest is the ultimate form of custom space with a lot of more furniture than the shared space.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Amazing. Then I think it pretty much explains the next question already, which is what was the primary goal or intention when designing the nesting feature?
Like I said, we really wanted our community and even just ourselves to be able to create a cozy space that we could hang out with our friends in. You could get together in if you want to form even just a group. Like you can say, we can literally say now to our friends, like, hey, come on over to my place and let's chat and let's hang out, and then we'll go out and do something. We never had that quite to that level. So I think that was a big goal for us, was to give our community that kind of space, as well as we wanted it to be themselves, right? Like we wanted them to be able to create something that is for them. So I feel like this is a feature that is aiding players' ability to sort of show the world who they are. And that had always been a goal. So not only, right, you normally can wear outfits, and we have all kinds of outfits now. You also now have your own place that you can decorate as your own. And I think that self-expression was a big goal for us.
So that the place, it doesn't serve as a space to just decorate, but it also serves a role as place to invite my friends, like claim my own area and come on over to my place. Interesting. So it's all about interaction that you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. You know, like I said, self-expression too, self-expression and interaction with friends. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is, is there any specific motive behind the current nesting area? We know that it's a small room and it really goes well with the overall mood of Sky game. But do you have a specific motive behind it?
I'll say, like, when designing spaces, we're always looking at a lot of inspirations, and we're always trying to think about, like, how would, we talk about almost like an apartment, like a small apartment. How could that feel in the world of Sky? Like, what would that look like? In the world of Sky, we only actually have so many different materials, right? Like, so what I mean by that is in the real world, we have wood, right? We have steel, we have concrete, we have all these things. Sky doesn't have all that stuff. It only has certain materials. Wood is actually one of them. We have the stone too. So we actually had to figure out what can we use to create sort of an apartment, like I said. And we ended up going with, we wanted it to still feel connected to our aviary area, so we ended up going with almost like a stone castle type of feeling, but a small room within that. And I think that worked pretty well. It's in line with all of the shops in aviary, right? Similar feeling. But it was just an empty floor plan that you get to decorate as your own. So that was what we were thinking about. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's always an interesting challenge to make something feel like the world of Sky. I think we did a decent job this time, and yeah, I'm happy with it for sure.
Uh-huh, that's so cool. So it's basically the imagination of how would an apartment would look like in Sky. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is, what do you think are some changes made since the early stage of nesting feature? What changes the most from the initial expectation you had when first designing this feature?
I think one of the things I want to speak about a couple things actually, just from a implementation standpoint. I don't know if you remember, but earlier, before this latest sort of nesting feature came in, the only way to actually select individual objects in a shared space was there were very specific buttons over top of them, and you had to get really close and sort of angle yourself towards them, and it could be hard to select sometimes. So we actually went through a really big process to make selecting objects easier. And I feel that that is actually so intuitive that a lot of people probably didn't even realize it changed. But basically, like on touchscreen, you just touch the object you want to select, and it selects it. Now on controller, you still have to go up to it and kind of come close to it. And on keyboard, you can just click on it. So with the mouse. So it's actually very intuitive, I think, process to select objects. And then, of course, when you select an object, you can then edit it and move it around and do whatever you want to do with it. But I think that was an early stage thing that when we were building this, we knew we wanted to improve that because we ourselves didn't like how it felt, and we had seen that other people didn't really like how it felt in the past. So that was one thing, and I think we ended up with something that was a lot better and a lot more fun than what we used to have. Another thing I'll say is we went through a lot of iteration on the apartment space, right? The nest space, how would it feel? We tried all kinds of things. I think some things, I'll be honest, actually are still things we're thinking about for the future that maybe we could try more, but we just didn't have time to get it right this time around. So we ended up going with kind of a more constrained, smaller space this time. And we felt actually that's the best to start with, is something that isn't overwhelmingly large, right? You don't want to have, for example, one design thing we had to think about is we didn't want our community to have a lot of big empty rooms as a space. That's not a good feeling. So we wanted it to actually be a little bit smaller, a little bit more humble as a starting space. And ultimately, maybe someday we could work up to like a bigger place. But this time around, we wanted to start small. And I think that took some iteration because at first we weren't sure what size space we actually wanted to give our community. And we played with it until we felt it was fun. And I think it's on the smaller side, I'll admit, but I think that actually is the most fun, at least for now. Yeah, and then the last thing I'll say is the actual interactivity of the placeables themselves. We spent a lot of time, especially towards the end, in making almost every single object that you place in the level or in your area is somewhat interactable. You can go up to it and there will probably be a button there. That took a lot of work actually to get that in place. I think when we first started working on it, we actually didn't have that in mind. And then once we sort of saw rooms coming together and we were playing in them and interacting with them, we realized, hey, this isn't fun. There isn't enough things that you can do with these. So I think it was actually the just internal iteration that we felt we needed to make it more interactable. So then we spent some time at the end to make that happen. And I'm glad we did.
So the interaction not only applies to the person-to-person interaction, to like invite friends, but it also applies to the person-to-furniture interaction.
That's right. Yep.
In that case, can we expect that the future furnitures to come in rotation through the shop will also mainly have their own unique interaction features?
So I don't want to promise too much, but
Sure.
what I will say is we're always looking at that. Yeah. And I will say, I think there will be definitely interactions on a lot of them. There are still some that are just really decorative and there aren't too many functions to those, or maybe any functions to some of them, but a lot of them will have functions. Yeah. And I think it just is more fun. Like I said, we tested it a lot. We ourselves have a pretty, strong vision for what we want it to feel like when you're in someone's place. And a big part of it is we want it to be interactive and more than just pure decoration. So, yeah.
After all, what do you think of the current nesting area and feature? Like if there's an ideal nest, let's say that's a 100% nest, how far are we?
I will say there's a couple of big features that I know about that we're working on that I'm excited about that I think will help. But at this stage, the nest is about 80% complete to what I would want. There's a couple of things that I definitely think would help. Actually, I can probably spoil at least one, which is I really want the ability to actually hang a mask, some of my masks up on the wall. I think that would be really fun. And again, that self-expression, would really help. So So those are things that I think about a lot, is just more self-expression, individual soul sort of put into their space. I think we can do more there. And so that's why I say 80%. I think there's still 20% more we can do there.
That's
So
awesome. The players already love the ultimate gift from the nesting guide, which is the sky figurine that they can
that's
put
right.
clothes on. So I think the mask feature will be also beloved.
Mhm.
The next question, I think a lot of players will be interested in this. How did we decide the maximum amount of furniture to be placed in the area, and are we planning to expand it in any near future?
Some of it actually kind of comes down to like runtime performance, from a technical side. So the reality is we can actually only have so many objects in there and only have so many interactions in there before we see some devices have performance issues, just loading it and running it. So that was actually another thing kind of behind the scenes work that we were doing, was just trying to optimize for some of that stuff. And we did a bit of it. I think there's still some work to be done there. And I will say, like, depending on that work will be depending on sort of if we can expand it or not in the future. I will also say I'm optimistic, though. I think that we can. To some degree, like I said earlier, we wanted it to have kind of that smaller, humble space at first. So in a way, I think from like a design vision perspective, what the Nest is right now is a good first version. But I definitely think that we will be ultimately making it better and expanding it, yeah. But it will come with time, right? It takes some work to get some of that stuff done, both on the technical side and even the design side, how we wanna do it.
So it was the device and the performance limitation that really applies
Yeah.
to the area. But I
Yeah,
like,
to some degree, yeah.
all right. And oh, I think it's an extension of what we just said. Will we expand the nesting area? Some fan suggestions are here, like terrace, extra rooms, higher rooftop. We can talk about how possible it is, but apart from that, do you find any of these like particularly interesting or attractive?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple ways we can look at that, right? So first is just how many furniture items you can place, right? That's one side of it. Like I mentioned, there's optimization work maybe in the works that we have to think about. But there's also another side of it, which is the space itself and being more creative with that space, having possibly a different area that you could decorate, or maybe a larger area that includes a little bit of outdoor space. Those types of things are definitely things that we have been thinking about and talking about. I think, again, I'll say this is really just the first version of the Nest. I think that there will be updates later that have improvements to it, or possibly expansion, or possibly another area that you will be able to get and decorate. I think those are ideas that we're excited about for sure. And I also think, like, I just want to say, like, I think we really look at community feedback a lot. We've been reading a lot of it. We see everyone's enthusiasm and ideas, and I think all of us are taking that into consideration and excited about it. I think we will see an expansion at some point for sure.
Yeah, after all, the nesting feature itself came out a lot of community requests that I want somewhere to decorate, like my own house.
Mhm.
The next question also serves a role as please put something more into my house, which is will we expand the custom options? Some fan suggestions are wallpaper,
Yeah.
floor, and furniture with new texture. How do you think of these suggestions?
So I love all of the suggestions. Wallpaper definitely is something we're looking at. Different textures and possibly colors. Being able to set the colors on the furniture is something we're looking at as well. And we're excited about it as a team ourselves. We're excited about it. But again, almost more importantly, we're listening to feedback, and we're trying to hit as much of that as we can. It's a lot of work, obviously, but yeah, we're doing our best to kind of hit those things that everyone wants. Again, I think it's just better for self-expression. So want to be able to go into someone's place and have it feel like their own, and whatever that means to them. So Yeah.
Okay, great. These all are just some fan suggestions about minor requests about the nesting area. You can just listen to it. First one, I'd love to hang my surfboard on the wall. So they don't want to interact with it, but just as a decoration. They want something unplaceable in the area to be placed in the area. I thought it was interesting. And this person want a custom frame prop so that they can add their own pictures there. And there is somebody who asked for a wish list feature for a specific furniture, instead of waiting for their favorite furniture to be back to the rotation like for a long time. And I want to bring a gift to my friend's housewarming party. I thought it was an interesting part because in Korea, there's a cultural thing that when you go to a housewarming party of somebody, necessities to their house. And very familiar example is the toilet paper. So it would be hilarious for other cultures that the main gifts you bring to somebody's house party is a bunch of toilet papers. But yeah, I think that pretty much explains why us Korean community want to bring some special gifts to their housewarming party of the friends.
Yeah, let me respond to these. So first, I think all of these are good ideas. I love the surfboard idea. I think that's almost similar to the mask idea that I mentioned earlier, where you could put something up on a wall. Surfboard is even a unique item all on its own in the game. I think it's one of the more playful items in the game. So we'll take that into consideration. As far as like picture frame, there are again kind of some challenges actually to that. I won't say no to it, but what I'll say is that it will take some extra special work actually to get something like that into the game. Mostly because if you think about it, where does that picture actually live? You know, is it coming from your device? Like, where is it actually coming from? So that's something that's kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, good idea for sure, and we'll consider it. I think as far as like gifts in general, Sky is really a game about gifting, you know. So I think like it makes sense to have something there for that. We've actually been kind of expanding gifting more and more recently because now when you have a creation of any kind, you know, whether that be a message boat or a shared space spell, you can actually gift the creator of that now. So that's a new thing that we recently added. And it was with that intention actually of what you're saying, which is like, if you create something great and you want to share it with the world, if people really like it, they should be able to send you a gift. So I think it's interesting to have like a housewarming party where players can give each other gifts. So we'll think about that, how that could work. I don't know if we really have toilet paper in the world of Sky, but maybe someday. But yeah, I think there probably would be another way, you know, we could do that.
All right. I think that ends pretty much sums up our interview for today. We answered to some player questions about the nesting space. How do you feel about it? Would you say some goodbye to the Korea community?
Yeah. Really appreciate everyone's support and creativity, I'll say, within the nest. I think we couldn't do it without you. You know, you guys mean everything to us. Continue enjoying your time playing our game and being a part of our community.
Actually, would you mind learning a simple Korean word saying goodbye?
Yeah, let's do it.
You can say 안녕.
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 안녕. Can you spell it? Can you type it for me?
안녕.
안녕. 안녕.
Okay, Sky players. 안녕.
안녕.